You are listening to Rep Radio, giving you an inside look at the plays and the players since 2009. Today on the podcast, Annie Dorsen, whose resume includes co-creating and directing the 2008 Broadway musical Passing Strange, presents Algorithmic Theater, her first career retrospective as part of the Bryn Mawr College Performing Arts series. Here is my interview with Annie Dorsen. And welcome to the podcast. I am your host, Darnell Radford, and today I am in the virtual studio with Annie Dorsen. Annie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes. So I've been getting some really interesting let's see. I've been getting some really interesting press releases about some great work that's going on in and around our community. So when they pop up, I always have to take a little bit of a dive to say, okay, what is it? Ooh, interesting, exciting. Okay, so when I came across this one, I said, "This is. I think they know me." They're like, what would Rep Radio like to talk about? I guess thinking about the nerdy tech theater. I'm half technology, half theater.
That's perfect.
So just this would be a good chat. So Annie, your work, Algorithmic Theater, is part of Bryn Mawr College Performing Arts series, and there are several pieces, and there's some of it shows up in the Fringe Arts as well, and so we'll talk about that. But first, tell us a little bit about Annie.
Oh, like my biography? Like I was
Annie on the
born
spot.
in New York City. So I was trained as a theater director. I went to school and got myself trained up, and then I spent the next 10 years kind of retraining or de-skilling, reskilling, I guess is the trendy way to put it. I spent a lot of time in Europe, hanging out with, various bohemian layabouts and also some very hardworking choreographers who taught me a lot about making performances that was not covered in the theater curriculum. And somehow the mix of work that I did sort of in more traditional storytelling theater and the work that I absorbed in the performance and sort of dance scene, the kind of experimental performance scene in Europe, combined into this thing that I'm calling algorithmic theater. Before that, I did work as a director, and I directed the Broadway musical Passing Strange, which was on Broadway in 2008. And it was soon after that I really shifted my focus. I talk about sometimes I took my Broadway winnings, gave me a little bit of a financial cushion to do some experimentation. And algorithmic theater is a term that I coined really to describe what I had already started doing but didn't yet know what it was that I was doing. And I thought, I'm working with technology, I'm working with computer programmers, I'm trying to figure out how to write code that can perform live in theater situations. It's not like multimedia performance, and it's not like tech art, it's something else. So I thought algorithmic theater.
Cool.
Is that good? Tell us about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you want more personal things?
No. That's great.
Okay.
It's kind of like during the pandemic, we were not sure what to call this new sort of this new take on virtual theater. So we were calling it Zoom theater. We just didn't have
exactly. So Zoom theater is kind of theater done on Zoom, and algorithmic theater is meant to convey something a little different. I started using that term, 2011, 2012. And at that time, the pieces that I was making And the ones that will be presented at Bryn Mawr are really about the computer code that I collaborate on with programmers that performs live. So you're in a regular theater, you're in a regular theater seat, and the lights go down, the lights come up somewhere else. And what you see is generated by a program that we have conceived, designed, written, and implemented. So the performances, the main three performances we're doing in the next couple of weeks at Bryn Mawr are Hello, Hi There, A Piece of Work, and Yesterday, Tomorrow. And there's a fourth piece, which is a little different, we can talk about. But those three pieces are essentially, when you go see them, you're seeing a completely new version of the piece. Because it's computer code, right? So it's working from a database. And for Hello, Hi There may be a few billion different possible scripts that could be generated from that code. Yesterday, Tomorrow is a music piece. There are definitely many, many billions of possible scores that could be created from that program and the data it has to work from. Same with A Piece of Work, which uses the text of Hamlet as the data, and the program that we wrote is kind of re-scrambling the text at every performance and creating, what I sort of call a new adaptation at every performance. So the script is the computer code. And what you see on stage is sort of that one iteration of what the code can do.
So I was thinking about how there is a conversation about how computers can essentially write a script for you now, and they're playing around with that, and it's like, I wonder what that's going to be like.
Yeah, I was
How
actually literally just writing a rant about this 20 minutes ago before we started talking.
Yeah, like how can a computer tug at your heartstrings?
Well, yeah, it's so one of the things that's interesting about seeing these pieces maybe all together, like three or four of them together, is that these were all made between 2009 and 2015. So at that point, it seems funny because it's not that long ago, but there was no open AI that was really functioning, or at least it wasn't accessible to the, for people to kind of go in and play with like we can do now. Large language models were, still a few years distant. Certainly in 2010, I kind of remember going to an AI conference in Toronto. I think it was 2012. And I was there to perform Hello, Hi There. And I went to all the talks at the conference. And they were talking about, one of the big talks was about early tests of self-driving cars. And it was still some years in the future to have a working version, but Google was starting to get into it. And the other talk was about how using statistical analysis could totally change the game with natural language programming. So for listeners who aren't familiar, natural language programming, or NLP, is the branch of computer science that's about trying to create a good imitation of regular human conversation or speech or language. So it's a kind of AI that has been being developed since, I don't know, 1950 or so, very rudimentary. And these new things like OpenAI and the text generation stuff that you're starting to, read about in the New York Times, those are an incredible breakthrough based on exactly what this guy was saying, that it's analyzing enormous amounts of text using sophisticated statistical analysis techniques and then being able to sort of generate new text that reflects those statistical inferences. So this didn't exist in 2010. And I mean, people were working on it, right? But it was not being used really, and it wasn't successfully being used, and it certainly wasn't some website that you could kind of go into and just play with as a layperson or an artist. Uh,
Yeah.
so everything we were doing, you know, way back in prehistoric times of 2010 was all handwritten code. And it was pretty much based on stuff that was existing since 30 years previous. You know, there hadn't been a lot of action in some of the language generation techniques until very recently. Then there's been this huge explosion.
Hmm. So what originally sparked your interest in all of this?
Yeah, so I just got a little technical, I guess. But I mean, this is, you said you're a
That's
part geek,
okay. We love
so
nerds. We love
part geek,
nerds.
right? I can speak to the part geek. Um, I started to play around with like these really old-fashioned natural language programs that are called chatbots. So a bot, is like any little program that can do something. It's like a robot that doesn't have a body. So it's like a little piece of code that can do stuff. So like the mailer daemon is a bot. It can tell you that your email didn't arrive properly, or you know. Uh, and I was playing with chatbots, and chatbots are little bots that are designed to make conversation with people. And I thought, like, this is theater. It's kind of about trying to create an illusion of a human through language that is like plausibly sounds sort of recognizably plausibly human.
Hmm.
So, that's kind of what plays do. Is if you have a play written by a playwright, they're sitting there trying to come up with dialogue that sounds, for the most part,
Human.
somehow recognizably human. And it isn't spontaneous speech, it's written. The chatbots, in some ways, are more human because they're spontaneous. They're making it up as they go along. So I thought, okay, so there's some connection here between chatbots and theater, just in terms of how the audience maybe believes or doesn't believe in the humanity behind what's being represented. So sometimes you watch a play and you're like, I don't buy that for a second, implausible, bad writing. With chatbots also, you have these moments where you're like believing, and then all of a sudden you don't believe because it sounds like they're tells that the computer code is just computer code, that there's no
Hmm.
person behind it. So I started thinking about these things, and I was playing around with this debate from the early 70s between Noam Chomsky and Michel Foucault. And their talk, it was for Dutch television, 1971 or 72, and they were, among other things, interested, both of them, in this relationship between thought and language, and what is creativity, and what goes into a new idea. Is it, like Foucault would say, like a new idea, a genuine new idea is like the most rare thing in the world, because we more or less kind of develop our ideas about the world from what we experience, and so in some ways we repeat rather than invent. And for Chomsky, a new idea is like the most common thing in the world. Everyone does it all the time. Like you go on the bus, you have a little chat with the bus driver. You've had new ideas. You've invented language on the spot, and it's an incredible achievement of our brain somehow that we can all do this. So it's like really different ideas about language and thought. And I thought, well, chatbots are kind of like a third idea about how language and thought interact. They're proposing somehow that you could totally split language and thought, and maybe a chatbot can say something that's sort of new in question mark, or in quotation marks, or maybe a chatbot can never. But that's like a question that's really about the audience, whether the audience feels like it's new or not. Can the audience be surprised? Can they find something funny?
Hmm.
So that was the set of questions I was asking with the piece "Hello, Hi There,"
And
and that like started the whole algorithmic theater thing off.
and what was the feedback you received from Hello Hi There at that time? Uh,
Yeah, this is such an interesting question. So the first performance I will never ever forget. There was like total silence. Afterwards, at the opening night party, like no one spoke to me. it was really one of those things where like the person who'd invited me said, "Yeah, yeah, okay." Well, we were in Austria, and it was at a festival. They were used to seeing like new, innovative things, but this just like totally. My experience of it was that it fell flat, and the person, the curator who invited me was like, "Okay, all right, okay, like all right," and that was it. Uh, and then over time, it changed. So I remember, early performances where people started finding it funny. That was like, and early performances where people didn't know what an algorithm was. So
Mm.
I got a lot of questions like, oh, if you could explain what an algorithm is before the piece, then maybe we would get it differently. And I was like, no, no, don't explain anything. You just see the piece. Or people who were worried about the takeover of theater by algorithmic actors or something like that. There wouldn't be any need anymore for human performers because chatbots would do everything. Uh, and so there are all those kind of responses. And then definitely over the last, like starting pretty soon after the premiere, 2010, 2011, the audiences, I don't know, like conversance with these questions and with the tools and with computer language and everything else just increased so much that you could almost feel it like year by year as we performed around that people got the piece like more and more and more.
Yeah. Um, I was thinking like even though art is so cutting edge and accessible, it sometimes we sometimes feel behind the curve a little bit. And I was wondering if when there was no feedback early on, if maybe they just didn't know what to do with it at that time, like it was ahead of its time.
I mean,
Like,
if it was ahead of its time, it was like by a matter of minutes or
mm,
like maybe a week.
yeah,
It wasn't really ahead of its time. And by I think, and there were certainly people who were like on my wavelength pretty early on. I remember the crew when we performed at that same tour. We premiered in 2010 in the fall, and we had like 4 or 5 performances in a row in different cities. The crew in Berlin like got really into it, and
mm,
you always know that you're onto something if like the production crew at the theater
yeah,
likes what you're doing. They have the best taste always, and they see everything, and so I felt like, aha, that's good. The crew's into it. They're like actually watching it while we're rehearsing. And there was a like a like a philosopher, that I was eager to impress, who also turned around and said, "Oh, I think you're the artist." And she said, "Oh, you have a very interesting piece." And I thought, that's it. I'm done. I don't need more. So there were people who were getting it like right away, but it's true that like the general audience vibe changed a lot over the following 2-3 years.
yeah. It just I've just paid attention to that over the years when I think about I mean, you can think about it in terms of like administrations in arts organizations are behind on technology,
Yes.
but at the same time, they're consuming all of this. It's supposed to be new and cutting edge, everything. It seems like when it comes to technology, we like check out. It's like almost if you went to a non-theater but like tech crowd, they would have loved this, and then you could say to them, and that's theater, and they're like, oh my god, I didn't think I liked theater. But it turns out because of the technical component that they get and they can process,
Yeah,
they
it's kind
find
of
a way.
complicated. It's kind of
Mhm.
complicated because I think there's also a way in which the field of like tech art is often about the latest tools and really showing what the latest tools can do. So I
Hmm.
tend to think of that work as a little bit like demonstrations of technology and not necessarily the most artistically interesting.
Mm.
I sometimes even derisively call it like trade show art, which is like,
Mm.
I made this thing so you can see what this thing does.
Yeah.
And there's not much to think about other than, wow, I didn't know they could do that. Like, cool, gee whiz. So, there are the big tech companies, and they're putting a lot of money into artists who want to make immersive worlds and who want to use their big data sets to create visuals. Some of this stuff, to be honest, is like propaganda for big tech. It's sort of taking this stuff, which is not great for the world, and we can definitely talk about that, but and making it seem sort of cool and cozy and like neat, and everyone like, don't be afraid of the power of Amazon, or the power of Facebook, Meta. It's like cool, right? Like Meta's cool. They're giving money to arts institutions to make these cool immersive worlds that you can take an Instagram photo in front of. I have a little problem with that politically,
Yeah.
and aesthetically, to be honest. I mean, that's not really interesting. The question about arts institutions and their relationship to technology, I think, is quite complicated. And it's weird because the history of theater is really wrapped up in new technologies.
Mm.
Theater, like, the age of like impresarios have always been interested in trying out the latest stuff to make cool effects on stage and to, wow audiences. So that's like the relationship of theater to spectacle. Um,
Yeah.
and of course, in the like, early 20th century, there's a whole, early adopter set of artists who were sort of like wildly experimental and maybe had kind of love hate with new technologies, which is maybe where I am a little bit more, the love hate relationship, or the doubting.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued but doubting.
What do you think makes us feel like we may be replaced by new technology? What do you think? What do you think that's all about?
I don't think we're going to be replaced. I think we're just being changed.
Hmm.
So, the I mean, when you talk about labor, for example, there you can talk about replacement because there's a way to really think about work and manpower, where it's
Hmm.
needed, where it's not needed, what kind of skills are needed for what kind of jobs. That's an area that I will not pretend to know very much about. But when you think about sort of generally humans, we're not going to be replaced. We're just being molded by the tools that we use. So
Hmm.
we make tools, the tools make us. There's a loop. And the thing I worry about with some of the large language models, with Dolly, the image generation stuff, is that well, I guess there's two issues. Immediately, there's a lot more issues than that, but there's two main issues for me. One is this question of corporate capture. So, when you're like a kid and you're into art and you're in maybe an art class in school and you get excited about how the paint does this thing and how you can make it do this thing, and you have to think to yourself, like, what do I want to make a painting of? That is like a really important part of the imagination, is like that first kind of interest in like doodling or making up rhymes, or playing around with like the stuff that's around you, and making a collage, you know.
Hmm.
So it's not just for kids. I mean, it's also hobbyists, it's amateurs, it's like outsider artists, it's anyone who has that kind of tinkering mind, which is in some ways like all of us. We
Yeah.
always like to tinker. That's like part of being human with opposable thumbs and everything. And I just kind of worry about that tinkering part of us like getting kind of like placed under the umbrella of big tech companies that offer us certain options. The software can do this. It's like Photoshop, there's like these are the tools,
Mhm.
and these are the colors, and of course it's every color. So you have endless options. You have endless options as long as you want the options they give you.
Yeah.
So it's like infinite choice as long as you accept their choices. And so there's a kind of, I call it like it's a it's corporate capture, right? Like the researchers of the OpenAI, they are capturing everything that people enter into those text boxes. They're capturing our data. They're capturing how long we spend doing things. They capture the outputs. They're learning from it. Learning is great, but everything they learn is owned by them.
Yeah.
So it becomes private property in a way that I find, it's a little concerning. So there's this part about like the imagination sort of falling under the umbrella of big corporations who have not proven themselves to be operating in the public interest, and that's a big thing I worry about. So I don't know
Yeah.
if that was kind of two things mushed together. Those were my two
No,
big
that's
issues.
great. Um, I was thinking about voice assistants.
Mm.
So, for example, my uh, like the audience can't see this, but my studio is controlled by technology,
Ah.
and it's also voice controlled too. And there are so many people who are concerned by that because if I were to call that out, that needs to go to the mothership before it comes back into the space that I'm in to control my devices to adjust the lights.
Yeah,
And
so you just turn the lights down and then back up
yes,
with
I just
instructions. But what was the
I just
instruction?
used I use this fruit themed technology company's kit. So I just used a home kit feature
Okay.
to turn them off and then turn them back on. And so I see that as a convenience, whereas a skeptic might see that as an intrusion.
It's both, of course.
Yeah.
It's we take one
And
or the other. And
yeah.
it's the magnificent bribe. Is this essay I've been looking at recently? It's not long. It's by a guy named Lewis Mumford from 1961 or two, uh, and he the title of the essay is on democratic and authoritarian techniques. So I
Hmm.
thought, well, that's interesting for right now. And one of the points he makes, which is in a way obvious now to all of us, is what he calls the magnificent bribe. You can have all the entertainment, the distraction, the convenience, the luxury in some ways, certainly in a world historical way, luxury. Uh, and aphrodisiacs, he says, you can have all that you want as long as you accept that you're under the control of
Yeah.
this other power. So, you know, there's a lot of studies about this that uh, people just give over their privacy when they're asked to read the terms of service. Nobody reads that, and
Mhm.
everybody knows that nobody reads that. When people are asked to even go to one extra step to say no cookies, please, almost no
Mhm.
one even bothers to do the extra step. We just click through. The convenience that we're offered is immediate, and the privacy that we give over is abstract.
Mm.
So it's hard to make continuous inconvenient choices over time for a benefit that you have no knowledge of,
Yeah.
which is to say, you've kept your data to yourself a little tiny bit, by going through all these inconvenient steps over and over and over again every time you do anything on the internet.
Yeah.
But the benefit isn't tangible. You're not even sure if there really is that much of a benefit. They take your data anyway, even if you say no cookies, even if you say no tracking, even if you say no this, no that, no the other. And everyone knows it, by the way. I mean, this is not news. It's not like somebody thinks we have a good system here that's really working.
Yeah.
Everybody knows the system is absolutely terrible. And
And and there are
we've,
sometimes if you're savvy enough to block those things, like let's say you do block cookies from your browser, then there are certain websites that won't load
yeah,
because
right.
they need the cookies in order to load.
They need those
So
cookies.
yeah,
Yep, that's right.
And if you're not savvy enough to say, okay, well, I'm just going to allow this one because because I need to get, you know, the content that comes from this website. Um, yeah, like you said, you just give in because of the convenience. You're like, I'll just leave it wide open so that I
Well,
don't have
yeah,
to worry
because we don't see any benefit to going through that inconvenience. I mean, I
about it.
think um, so you were talking about the voice activated lights in your studio. I was just looking that Amazon is trying to buy Roomba, iRobot, that make the
Hmm.
little
Yeah.
vacuum cleaners. And I was thinking, wow, they already have Alexa in there,
Hmm.
and Alexa hears everything that goes on in your home, even when it's sleeping.
Yeah.
Uh, and now they're going to have a visual map of everything that goes on in your home, because the vacuum cleaners now have cameras. So,
So crazy.
the privacy terms of agreement or terms of service for iRobot say, we don't sell your data to third parties. Well, they won't have to because Amazon is their owner. So it's not a
Yeah.
third party, right?
And they'll
So
be able to use it
that's incredibly
everything.
powerful. And it's not so much like they're really going to be, like anyone's really so particularly interested in what you're doing in your room. But
Hmm.
taken in aggregation with all the other data, it's enormously powerful tools. And if anyone should become interested in what you are doing in your room, that information can be gotten with a warrant. So, there's all these privacy issues which are really a bit chilling. The
Yeah.
other, thing that's a bit different now than it was like 12 years ago, at least from somebody who doesn't work in the tech industry. I don't know what the conversations were within that field. At that time, it sort of felt like we could use the tools for other purposes. Like, so those early pieces of mine were trying to like expose the way they work. I was using old fashioned technology even for 2010, 11, 12, 13. I was never using the most up to date stuff. But that was by design because I was hoping that for people who don't know much about how code works, they could start to see how it works just by watching the piece. So they could have some little experience of demystification. It's not magic. It's like there's some pretty simple instructions, and you can maybe even take a guess at what the instructions were just by watching the output. And that seemed like, kind of important stuff to do back then. Like like it was possible to use the tools for other purposes. It was possible to demystify them. It was possible to sort of like empower ourselves in relation. That feels less possible now.
Mm.
The tools are more opaque. They're more complex. All the machine learning stuff is, you know, it uh, it can't be supervised in the same way that older computer code could be supervised.
Yeah.
Not even by the people who wrote the code. There's parts of it that are too complex for anybody to supervise, let alone, little old you and me.
Yeah.
So
Um,
that's like I think a new challenge that we've got.
have you had the opportunity? Um, I know as we're talking now, uh, the the events haven't quite started.
No, Thursday is the
Yeah,
first
starting
ones.
Thursday. But has anyone other than the people who brought you to Bryn Mawr, have they experienced it yet? Have you had conversations yet?
Um, no, the piece, yeah. So the premiere of a piece of work, we're doing one performance of that piece on Thursday, and then the following two nights will be Hello, Hi There, the piece I was talking about before with Chomsky and Foucault. And then on Sunday, on Saturday night. Oh, we didn't talk about Spokaoke. That's something else. That's like a fun blow off steam kind of piece.
Hmm.
I mean, they're all fun, whatever. But Spokaoke is genuinely a blow off steam piece. That's on Saturday night after Hello Hi There, and then on Sunday there's a little presentation of a publication that I've put together with the dramaturg and editor Tom Seller, um, which includes a bunch of essays that I've written, some essays people have written about my work, some interviews, and there's going to be a nice, I think, chunky conversation about some of this stuff that we're talking about with a couple of people who contributed essays to the book. And then next week is Yesterday, Tomorrow, the music piece. So it's all
I
coming out.
yes. It is such an interesting time for your work. As we're having this conversation, we are right on the heels of the fruit themed technology company announcing new technology or just refreshed technology. And people get very excited about these things, and they can't wait to like throw out their devices that have no problems, for the new devices. And I can see how that excitement could also contribute to their ignorance of saying like, you know what, I don't care what it is, I just want it. I just want to be the
Yeah.
first one to have it. And it does, like, I don't know, it does this one thing, but there's something else here that you really needed to pay attention to, and you're just like, get to the price. How much does it cost?
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, I don't tend to think of people as being so ignorant. I think things are kept obscure. Like
Mm.
the real cost of a lot of these technologies is purposely kept hidden,
Hmm.
and the real cost in terms of electrical usage, power, and that impact on climate
In the environment, yeah.
in the environment, the real cost in terms of the labor conditions at the mining facilities that mine the chemical and the minerals that are necessary to put the devices together, the real cost in terms of the assembly line work that goes into assembling the devices. There's the real cost of cloud computing,
Hmm.
also, which sounds so ethereal and so, it's just up there in the cloud with the, angels and the harps or whatever. But
Which
uh,
one? That one?
yeah, in
No.
fact, it uses enormous amounts of power. The AI stuff uses enormous amounts of power. I
Yeah.
think there was some crazy statistic like I don't know, is it possible more than half of the energy usage of Google goes into their AI systems?
Hmm.
It's just a churn. Because the data sets are so large, it is very, very energy intensive. So, the terms of service, we already talked about those. Like, they're purposely endless and nobody reads them, and everybody knows nobody reads them, so nobody feels like they should read them. So the language is also difficult. It doesn't really just say in plain language what is happening to your data. It uses these things like, we don't sell your data to third parties. Well, a lot can happen that doesn't fit the definition of selling your data to a third party.
Yeah.
And anyway, we don't even know what our expectations of privacy should be anymore because things are changing so quickly, and we're a little bit like, frogs in boiling water, kind of getting used to things before we've had a chance to orient ourselves to what is
Yeah.
happening. So I don't really think people are so ignorant. I think it's that almost everything we've been talking about, is the work of private companies, and they have trade secrets, and there's not a lot of access to information. And
Yeah.
the tech press could do better, to be fair, if we're really going to be honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
But yes, of course, people love the shiny new object, and the the consumer goods are so like pleasant, and they feel great in the hand and whatever. And some companies are really good at that, and
Hmm.
that's fine. Um, I mean, commodity fetishism. Come on, it's it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
The
So,
shiny new bicycle too.
so you're using algorithms and technology in your work. Um, how how does technology play a role in your life?
I mean, not different, I don't think, than most people in the U.S. It's pretty entwined. I'm having this conversation with you. I'm during the pandemic. There's plenty of Zoom. I'm off social media which is good.
Hmm.
Feel better, sleep easier. I'm
Yeah,
still
that
on
is.
Twitter. I can't help it. I can't get off Twitter, but I'm off the Facebook and Instagram and all that. But those again, like I never really think of individual consumer decisions as doing all that much if we're totally
Mhm.
honest with ourselves. I mean, it would, of course, if there was a mass movement, it would change things, but it's very hard to get that going. Um,
Yeah.
the only one I have real faith in right now is Lena Khan, who runs the FTC, who's doing great, and she's finally really going for some uh, more government action on some of these things.
Mm.
We should be talking about art more instead. We're talking about like privacy issues and government regulation. I don't know what else.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Especially considering what we have just gone through, what we're still going through. The value of art, for artists became way more relevant, I mean, way more valuable, and we still seem to be chasing other things and not necessarily tapping into that value, um, wholeheartedly as a society. Like when because we are artists, uh, we're still immersed in it as we've always been, if not more now. But there are still people who live all over the place who are just not really, not really seeing the value in it, or really processing that they do value it.
Mm.
It's kind of like somebody who says, I don't like musicals, but I love going to concerts.
Mm.
Like a concert is a musical.
Yeah, it's music.
There's a storytelling component that sort of transitions us in between, songs. Uh, there's that engagement. It is an experience altogether. It does have similar vibes. Like I think they end up getting deep into it and thinking about like, well, it's about me sitting still and not being able
Mm.
to enjoy myself versus being over here rocking out to like my favorite tunes. Um, but it is interesting that even though we do see the value of art because it's all around us, like everything that isn't nature that moves us is art, you know. But we still, at least here, um, we don't see it as we don't see the value that we see. I mean, everybody doesn't see the value that we see so much. It's like when you think about it in terms of funding, it's like, well, some people get that funding. There isn't like this general pot. Like, you want to be an artist? Okay, great. Here,
Mm.
um, it's uh, it's just it's just interesting to see these two things come together because technology and the arts, particularly theater, have been the mainstays in my life. I've seen so much value in both of them, um, but I still come across people who, uh, don't really make the connections.
Mm.
And so it makes me think, like, what do you hope an audience would take away from this experience altogether?
Oh, I mean, the pieces are uh, can be funny and the pieces can be moving, and I've definitely had audience members who, um, have said they were surprised by how funny or they're surprised by how moving. Uh, but I think, I always say like the audience is full of people I haven't met yet and might not
Mhm.
ever meet. And so it always feels a little presumptuous for me to decide what I think they need.
Yeah.
I'm
Mm.
giving a gift and it's something that I worked really hard on. And it's like I kind of got a childish thing of like, here, I made this thing. And then people will be interested or they'll find it maybe a little beautiful or a little weird or a little funny or a little something. I don't know. It doesn't totally feel like it's for me to say. But uh, the one thing I know that I was trying to do is offer an opportunity to think about these things. And I find that to be like a very pleasurable experience to have some ideas activated in my mind and to be wondering and curious how things are put together and why they work like that. So, that spirit of kind of curiosity is how I made the pieces. So I do hope, I guess, that people have that feeling of curiosity when they come see us.
Yes. So we hope the curiosity is piqued in all of this. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
thinking, right? Hannah Arendt says thinking is a good defense against fascism. So we need more defenses against fascism. So
yes.
thinking.
Yes. We can't check out. We have to, we give ourselves to these experiences, but then take away, uh, take that experience away with us and continue to think about it, continue to engage in that conversation. Yeah. So let's go through the pieces in general again, so that we know what the overall collection is. Starting with a piece of work, September 9th.
Yeah, piece of work is kind of an adaptation of Hamlet.
Mm.
Uh, so I call it like a literal Hamlet machine. And the text of Hamlet is being scrambled by a set of algorithms that also automatically control the lighting and sound and the underscoring and the stage situation. So that's Thursday. On Friday and Saturday are Hello Hi There, which was my first algorithmic theater piece in 2010, and that's a piece for two chatbots kind of improvising a dialogue about language, creativity, and power. On Saturday night is the first performance presentation of Spokaoke, which is a participatory event, and it's like a karaoke for historical and political speeches. So there's over 100 short videos, like karaoke videos of speeches from ancient Greece to Tamika Mallory, and like lots of stuff in between that are available. Like the text is available, so people from the audience can get up and perform the speech, like karaoke. And that's going to be at the Fringe, like a week from Saturday, I think. I don't know the dates. People are going to have to go to the website. I don't know what the website is. You're going to
we'll
maybe
have
look
the
that up and tell them.
we'll have the
Uh,
link.
you could have a thing, right, that could tell them where to go for more info. And then the following week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, are three performances of Yesterday, Tomorrow, which is an algorithmic music piece where the score starts with Yesterday by the Beatles, and over time it starts to change the pitches and the durations of the notes and the syllables of the lyrics, and it slowly transforms into Tomorrow from the musical Annie. That's sung by three incredible contemporary music vocalists live. They've never seen the score before. I mean, they know the idea, but because it's being generated in real time, it's a new score for them. So they do the whole piece sight singing, which is really virtuosic and amazing.
Wow. Well, this all sounds so exciting, and great placement. I mean, we're right in that window of time where everybody wants to be uh, completely immersed, to the point that we're somewhat overwhelmed by by the types of art we can consume, particularly with this month with Fringe Arts, and the sort of unofficial beginning of our theatrical season. Um, yeah, this all sounds very exciting, and we'll have this all broken down in the show notes, so that you can, and the link to the website that Bryn Mawr set up for all of this information, which even includes there's some video clips in there
Yeah, there's
too,
some video clips.
so you can take a look and kind of get the gist of what you're experiencing in there. Before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to say about algorithmic theater?
No, I just want to say thank you. This has been so fun. It's been great to talk with you.
Yes. Well, Annie Dorsen, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about algorithmic theater. Algorithmic theater. It's currently running. So if you're listening to this right now, you can find a window of time to experience this. We're gonna have the link in the show notes, and there are four key pieces in here that you can be experience, and then the book. There's a book
Yeah,
as
the
well,
book presentation on
the
Sunday.
book presentation as well. So Annie Dorsen, Algorithmic Theater, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Rep Radio is an Emory production. You can follow us on social media, on Twitter and Instagram at rep_radio, and Facebook at Rep Radio. If you would like to be a guest on our show, visit our website at em3ry.com. Ride with us. Emory is on the move.